Hello and welcome back for another perfectly normal Heresy Friday. I mean, that by itself is abnormal because it's normally Heresy Thursday, but we're a day late today. And I did think to myself, surely they're not stopping Heresy Thursdays this quick. Like, we've had a few. It felt like we were on a good run. But yesterday, nothing. But we only had to wait 24 hours because they decided to drop something fairly big. I don't know why they dropped this on Valentine's Day, whether that was an actual purpose behind that or whether it's just a hilarious coincidence, or possibly that they are in fact introducing Angron, 30k Angron Ascended, and Lotara Sarin as the ultimate power couple. That's not what they're doing. That is not it. But that's what we've got. Angron ascends and the Conqueror gets its captain in the Horus Heresy. I did not have that on my bingo card, I'm not going to lie. I would have thought maybe if they're going to show off Angron, it might be a reveal show style thing. It might be a big event, but it's Friday, and that is worthy of dropping a Primarch, apparently. Anyway, look, we've got the man himself. Again, technically, we do already have him 40k, but this is obviously the Horus Heresy version. We've got to take a look, right? We've got to take a look. We're just going to go straight to the slightly bigger picture. Obviously, there is something to mention here, which is that once again they have done an Ascended Primarch for the Horus Heresy with the biggest, spindliest looking wings. Maybe spindly's not fair. Maybe they're not that spindly. They look like a nightmare to transport, though, is what I'm getting from this. They've gone for the Fulgrim approach, which is to give him these really, imposing, nicely detailed wings that, take up quite a bit of the kind of model real estate. But again, it just looks like it's going to be a nightmare to take anywhere, which it might not be. It might be fine, but that is my gut feeling looking at those. Admittedly, very cool, raggedy, slightly raggedy wings. I do like the ends of them. Nice spiky bits going on. Overall, it's a good look. It's a good look, but yeah, I don't want to take that out of my house ever. Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, that's fine, but I can't actually see much of Angron himself because we had to zoom out so much for the wings. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. They've covered that. That, to me, initially, that is a good-looking Demon Primarch. I actually really like this. I will say it is a little bit strange proportions-wise, this model. I think a big part of it, though, is I've been conditioned when I think of Demon Angron, like Demon Primarch Angron, I've been conditioned now to think of this, because we got this first. This is the one that I'm used to. This is the one that I've seen most often, obviously, because it's the only one that existed for a little while there. And he is extremely demonic at this point. So him freshly ascended versus him in 40k, there are some notable differences. And so initially I was like, oh, it looks good, but it also looks kind of weird, and I don't really know why. It's because it's that midway point between what we have for the 40k version and what we have for his non-ascended model, which looks like this. And I think actually when you switch between the three, it makes a huge amount of sense what they've done with, Angron Ascended. I mean, we can clearly see that the armour is very similar to what he was wearing when he was not a big angry red lad, as opposed to just being an angry lad. There are definite design cues taken from his standard Primarch model over to being a Demon Primarch. Like, the shoulders especially haven't changed all that much. The shape of the breastplate isn't all that different. Even the leg armour, relatively similar, but it's got more ornamentation, there's more spikes. In some ways it looks like it's swelled out a little bit to accommodate his newer form. The overall silhouette is obviously a lot more busy now. He is, after all, covered in spikes and chains and skulls and more chains and more spikes and more skulls and more chains and spikes. But the armour itself, when you take away those adornments, is not that dissimilar to what he was wearing before. And even things like those leather straps hanging down, which I have never learnt the name of and probably should, they're still present as well. Differently coloured, obviously, on the newer version, but those design, hallmarks of his armour are still there in his ascended form. I think for a newly ascended Angron, this is a good model. There are things that are a little bit odd in some ways. The amount of ornamentation and extra gubbins going on for the chest make the legs look kind of slim and long. They're not actually that slim. It's not like he's wandering around on little stick legs. They're pretty meaty. He's got some calves going on there, as we can see, but there is a lot of stuff happening in that chest area. Between the chains hanging down, between those leather straps, between the icon that forms his extremely extra belt that he's got going on there, the skulls as well, there's a lot bulking it out. So his actual shape, like the shape of his body, is kind of lost there, honestly. I think it's become more square than perhaps it's meant to, just by the sheer amount of stuff that's piled all over it. I mean, if we look at the older version, yeah, he's kind of, you know, he's blocky. He's got a bit of muscle mass going on, but there is still something of a shape to him, whereas that shape is extremely covered in this version just because of the extra gubbins. The change to the legs is kind of cool because you can see he's got those demonic feet, which end up being so much worse when it's 40k time. But it feels like a sensible shift from his standard Primarch model to this one, to have it be mostly the same, but with those kind of significant differences, but only at the ends of the legs. He's still got like a humanoid leg structure. It's not gone full animal / demon yet. And I will say, I think the armour on the legs looks really, really cool. It looks really good. I really like the shoulder pads. The shoulder pads look fantastic. So does that massive collar and the chaos icon going above the head, making a sort of unholy halo. That looks really nice. I like that a lot. The weapons are cool too. Now, of course, they're not the same weapons that he has in 40k. In fact, one of the weapons that he has in 40k, full-on chainblade, so definitely a departure there. But we know that Angron doesn't really care about weapons all that much, and from now up until 40k, I'm pretty sure we get some stuff broken by the Grey Knights and the like, so the weapons being different makes sense from like a narrative standpoint. They look brutal, they look chaotic, they're fun. They're fun weapons. Obviously a bit ridiculous. I mean, they're covered in spikes like you wouldn't believe. The sword is more point than edge, which is kind of impressive for the type of sword that it is, but then it is also extremely spiky, so it does make sense. And when I say makes sense, it's silly, but it's silly in a fun way, so do we care? Probably not. I keep going back and forth on the face. I'm not 100% on the face. I don't think it's a bad face. I think the face is fine, but for some reason it's just not sitting right, and I can't really explain why that is. I think that is just one of those personal things where it's like, it's just not quite hitting, but I'd be hard-pressed to give you a definitive reason as to why. Sometimes there isn't one. Sometimes you just see something and you're like, But the rest of it I really like. He definitely does feel very, very blocky in the middle, but that is just down to the sheer amount of stuff hanging off him. There's so much stuff hanging off this model, it's unreal. The thing is, even though it makes him quite busy, it still feels appropriate, it feels barbaric. And it does also, again, kind of lead into what he becomes later on down the line. You know, you can still see a bunch of trophies on this version. This version altogether far more monstrous, far more demonic. I mean, he looks basically like a big old bloodthirster with more armour, which is kind of what he's supposed to at this stage. But it does, I think it works well. You can see the development over time. And I think when you go back to that initial model, and then you move over to the Ascended version, and then you move over to the 40k version, it does tell a story of someone changing and not for the better. The weapons are known as the Blades of the Red Angel, by the way. They're not specifically named. He didn't name them, doesn't care. So that's what he's got right now, and then at some point, no doubt, break, get nicked, something will happen, and they'll get new ones, and then eventually he'll end up with the absolute nutter axe that he has there, and that insane sword as well. Overall, I think that is a decent, like, Angron Transfigured, not Ascended, technically. The headline of the article is Angron Ascends, but it's actually Angron Transfigured. But it's not just him. It's not just him. He does look great, but it's not just him. There's also Lotara Sarin, and one of the things that they've done in this article is issue a amazing and wonderful burn against Angron that I love. So this is Lotara Sarin, and Lotara is everything the Primarch is not. Calm, level-headed, and respected by the World Eaters. Well, there was no need. There was no need to go after him that hard, but they did. They just went for him. Went straight for him with that one. God. Honestly, I can think of several people that I know who are going to be more excited about this model than about Angron Transfigured. Like, Lotara Sarin, it feels like this is a character who captured the hearts and minds of the nation. Pretty much everyone who read Betrayer and just anything that she had anything to do with went, Yeah, I mean, okay, Space Marines are cool, but what about her? What's going on with her? We want more of that. And now she finally has a model, which is awesome. I will say that the paintwork on the model, specifically the hand on the chest, is... I mean, there's just no way I would ever be able to paint that myself, which makes me sad, but it does look fantastic. For some reason, I always thought that if they did a model for this character, she would be standing with her hands, like, clasped behind her back, glaring at someone. That is just what I assumed they would do. They've gone for a more generic sort of heroic pose. Can it be heroic? Can a traitor be heroic? There's a philosophical question that I'm not going to get into at 25 to 4 on a Friday. I just don't have the mental space for that, so I'm just going to ignore it. You argue it out yourselves in the comments, and we'll just go with general consensus, shall we? I mean, I like this. I do like it. It's a good looking model. Might not be the pose that I would have assumed they would go for, but I don't think it's a bad pose either. It's a classic, tried and tested, usually looks alright. The World Eaters logo on the boots looks really cool. I like the overall uniform full stop. It's pretty good. And those tassels and stuff hanging from that chain around the neck, the extremely ornamented, it almost looks like a mayor's chain of office or something. I like it. It's good. I will say as well, decent face. Decent face on this one. I actually really like the sword as well. The sword feels like it's treading a line between looking important and not too complicated. I don't know really the best way to describe that in a more succinct fashion, but it looks like the sword of someone who should be carrying a good sword. I know that sounds stupid, but so does a lot of the stuff I say, so don't read into it too deeply. Funnily enough, her sword does have a name, which is Conqueror's Bite, and she doesn't like it. She doesn't want a sword with a name, she doesn't care. So that's pretty funny. I mean, as they say, a name Lotara hates, having much the same disdain of naming swords as Angron. You can see why they got on, can't you? She didn't put up with any of his bullshit, and she also agreed with him on key matters, like naming swords is for idiots. Even if you all know that naming swords is, deep down, inherently kind of cool. And stupid, but that's what makes most of 40k fun. Anyway, let me know what you think of those two in the comments down below. I'm super interested to see what people think of Angron. I feel like he's going to be something of a contentious model, but I'm guessing Lotara Sarin is going to do pretty well. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.